Welcome to the final episode of Henley Center for Leadership Jam's Conversation With. Today we have a conversation with Tim Clayton Ball, who is the Global Head of the Leadership Practice at Deloitte. The Henley for Leadership Center Jams are really about deep conversation, mutual learning, and understanding what people who, for some reason or another, made a difference, have a position in leadership, and sharing their deep insights over the years of their careers. And so I'm very glad that we can welcome Tim today. Hello, Tim.
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for making time.
You're very welcome.
So Tim is with Deloitte and heads up the global leadership practice. He has had a career starting in industry, but then really in professional service firms and knows the ins and outs. And it's a huge privilege to have you here and share some of the thoughts, understanding, and experience around leadership. So welcome.
Thank you.
Well, let me start with a look back. When you look back at your career, when did you first think that what you're doing feels like, looks like leadership?
So that's a really, really good question. My mind automatically goes to a work-related situation, but I think, if I'm honest, it goes way back, probably to the age of 15, 16. My mum died when I was quite young, and complete shock to everybody. But I was the youngest and the only person at home. My brother and my father were both working. And so automatically I assumed this role of mum. Shopping, cooking, cleaning, as well as doing schoolwork and trying to get through my education. And while it was an awful time, a couple of things happened there, and there was a lot of management there, right? Just managing time. But what I realised was a lesson about self-leadership, needing to really motivate and energise myself to get through the day, because it was pretty dark, and also being there in support of my father and my brother. And even though, there were times where it grated on me, having to do that, that was the role I needed to play. And there was a part in that as well that was being, I guess it was courage in a way, but being bold and realising that I could quite easily stay in that situation and become dependable. And so I had to get out. I had to follow my dreams. And as what Arnie Schwarzenegger says, you've got to have a vision and you've got to ignore the naysayers, because there were plenty of naysayers. And I think for me, if I think about my first brush with leadership, it was probably those moments when I didn't even realise that I was showing leadership in a way. But that was it. That then probably disappeared for many years after that. But that was my brush with leadership.
And that's fascinating, because for us, leadership is happening in all spheres of life, right? That we often think it exclusive to business or setting, but that's just a very limited space where we engage in that. If you look at your business career, when did you figure that there's something going on that looks like leadership?
I think it was probably. It went with title and position, which again it is such a myth that exists, that people that are promoted into a position are automatically a leader or have leadership capabilities. And for me, it really was that moment of recognition. I think before that, I'd always shown. Depending on who you were talking to, either dysfunctional behaviours or leadership behaviours, because I was very good at setting a stall out, creating some sort of energy around that, and helping people to come on a journey of some sorts. I've always been in and around the change kind of world. really low boredom threshold. So for me, moving through organisations in a change capacity has always been something that's required an element of leadership. And I was in industry before getting into professional services. So spent 6 or 7 years in industry and doing those sorts of roles.
Yeah. Fascinating. You already started to allude to, what you do with leadership, right? And one of the core questions or phrases we always use at the Henley Center for Leadership is the question of leadership for what and who, right? And so what is the purpose of you engaging in leadership? What do you want to achieve with leading?
So I'm really fortunate in that I do a lot of work with leaders that are in transition, moving on in an organisation, new role, moving to a new organisation, or even supporting them, when they're on the downward spiral as well as the upward spiral. And that has put me in a really privileged position to really look at the influence I can have in helping people to almost step that stone to a different future, and that becomes very much then the heart of the who I do leadership with and for, is very much in terms of being a stepping stone for people, being there as much as I can in support of people. There's I don't know whether it's a poem or a song but the words that always come to mind for me is by what's his name, Christopher Logue. Come to the edge. It's too high. We might fall. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. And I think those words for me really sum up the responsibility of leadership, that you're there to help people to be successful and to thrive, whether that's in their professional career or whether that's in their personal career. But happiness and the ability to thrive is really important to me. And that's the legacy I would hope I leave behind with people.
That's a fascinating story, I have to say, because it often looks like a cliff, right? And
exactly.
And helping them to understand that it might not be, but actually can make it. That's fascinating. Yeah. Do you, and you mentioned already, that they enjoy their work and do you look at broader impact of what you're doing as well? You say you develop individuals, and do you look beyond that? So what they do with that, or what you can move?
I do. It's really, and it's probably a really topical question for me at the moment, and that is from a professional services perspective in particular. I'll talk about my personal views in a moment, but really trying to understand and map the upstream value of the work I and we do from a leadership perspective. So you take that we might be working with a leader on their personal transition and to a new role, new job, new company. That invariably brings significant opportunity down the pipe. And while there's a completely no sales zone environment there, that automatically presents opportunity. Because if you're seen to help people, if you're seen to care, if you're seen to take the time out to invest in an individual, I think it pays back in ways that you sometimes can't imagine. So we're deliberately trying to track those moments at the moment. I know that I was kind of recalling to the team the other day that in my 12, 13 years with Deloitte, I've only ever worked with 5 clients. Those 5 clients are still on my Christmas card list, and that to me is really important. Equally, clients before that I like to maintain eye contact on what they're doing. I have a client at the moment that has had some bad news, and my purpose is to support and to encourage and to help where I can. So it goes way beyond the paycheck, way beyond the an engagement's worth 20 pence. Therefore, that's all I can do. It's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah, That's fascinating.
Dogs are for life, not for Christmas, they say.
No, that's right. That's right. So I think it's in the time horizon that we actually have in what we're doing is a fascinating idea, whether we just think short term or we actually accept that things are long term, and there's a commitment to long term with all the ups and downs that might appear, and also then we can actually also truly think of what has happened, right? From our, if I may ask one more question, there's a lot of debate around to organization, but also individuals in position of responsibility around societal issues, inequality, climate change. We just have COP around again a year after, and so. And then there's personal societal issues around well-being, the stress levels. So how do you as a person and or Deloitte, position themselves? Because that seems to be still a murky place, right? And so what are you aiming to do there? And is that something that you're keen on, or is it difficult, or what are any views?
Wow, that's such a big question.
Here for big questions, right?
Yeah, I love a big question. We might need a bit longer. Yeah. So our purpose is to make an impact that matters, and that societal impact is a significant part of our whole ethos as an organisation. So I guess start from a corporate-wide position. I think then that trickles down obviously into platforms that we are really passionate, keen and interested in. So, ESG is one of those that we're putting a lot of time and effort into figuring out how we can help clients to, move that dial. And there is a huge leadership component to that, needless to say. The whole equality from a workplace perspective is a significant passion for me at the moment, and really thinking about how we let's just sort the gender agenda out first, right? And so I've been fortunate enough to be the architect and to take part in a sponsorship program that we're trialing in Deloitte initially, but that sponsorship program is getting sponsors and sponsees through a development path that really helps to promote that next level of women in our business. And again, that is gaining a lot of interest externally, which is fantastic for us, but also recognising the broader problem. Mm-hmm. And again, you've probably seen all of the stats, you've probably read all of the headlines. And I think more broadly, cost of living comes into everything we do. We're not only impacted by that in terms of clients being a bit more cautious, but also helping them think through how they can deal with it. So all of those themes are naturally on our agenda. I think from my perspective, there is a need for greater clarity around those things. Mm-hmm. There is a need for, and I'll use the word leaders in terms of those people in position to properly carve the time out in thinking through their take on it as an organisation or as an individual, and the role they're going to play in moving the dial. It's quite amazing that things like the women in business still needs the business case explaining today. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so there's still a lot of work to be done in and around all of those topics. I think we're just scratching the surface. Yeah,
that's fascinating. We do some work on figuring out, right, what are the actual contribution that leadership or leaders should make. And I think there's confusion.
Yes.
And there's some great practice already, stuff that you just shared. But at the same time, we need to think about the picture that's digestible, but also really matters to the outside. Indeed. And I think that's where many started. And it's interesting to hear what you're doing. And that is a longer journey, but we don't have too much time at the same time.
Time is running out.
That is, no, thank you for that. One more question in that area. How do you evaluate for yourself the impact that you have, right, with your work? How do you keep track? How do you know that, I or we, through my practice or my personal involvement, have achieved what I actually aim to do with my engagement?
Oh, wow. So I guess from a couple of areas, and I think age really helps in answering that question. If I'm honest, I'm clearly quite young though. Still,
obviously,
very young.
Me too.
Exactly. I think for me that I fortunately had a bit of a crisis with my purpose about 4 or 5 years ago, and as a result, you just didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I put a lot of investment into myself, and took myself off to Findhorn near Stonehaven in Scotland, and did a proper week's retreat with Dr. Jude Currivan, cosmologist, ex-CFO, altogether amazing person. And through that, I realised, my purpose was to help unlock leadership in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
That was just me realising what people had told me before. So, kind of the penny finally dropped. I'm a bit of a slow learner. And through that then, I think that's really enabled me to face into the opportunities and the situations that tick that box, but more importantly then recognising that there are things that give me energy, things that drain energy from me, and that the most value that I can give is where I get energy from something, and it's a two-way street. And so I've learnt to tap into more of my spiritual side, but to channel that and to really, I was always told that at school, right? You get better results from the subjects that you love, that you're passionate about. And I think that would be my encouragement to my team: follow your heart, do the things that give you passion, and that will pay back in many areas. And it reinforces what I said a moment ago. There's a reason why my client from 2005 is a client and friend today. Because I saw an opportunity, the energy was right, we were connected, and over the years we've done some amazing things together, and we're partners in crime. And I very much look at, I hate the word client, but I look to build lasting relationships with clients. I look to build lasting relationships with my colleagues. I look to build lasting relationships with my team. Now, clearly not everyone makes the cut. I get cut off their list or they get cut on my list, but that's okay. And that to me is a very woo-woo response to the how do you. So forgive me for that. But
no, that's fine. It's interesting criteria, parameter that you look at. And the idea that we keep connecting is kind of like it's like an evaluation in itself,
Totally.
right, by the other person. Right?
Totally.
We often ask us to evaluate, but actually it's as important to think while noticing what the other side says. Who do you do leadership with, and when do you know to step aside and give others in your sphere actually the leadership remit and you step into different roles?
I do leadership with anybody, and I'm really good at, he says, complimenting himself. How arrogant! I think I'm really good at giving people the opportunities to step to the edge and fly. And way back in my consulting career, one of my bosses used the analogy of a dog lead and a dog. You can let the leash out, and that can be an extendable leash. But the moment things start going wrong or you observe cracks, you start pulling the lead in. And so that was a bit brutal, I thought, in terms of thinking about leadership. But it has taught me a really valuable lesson that there's empowerment, there's abdication, and I think you've got to be really careful that you're not abdicating by giving people a job to do, and you've got to think about the appropriate way of being there to support them and help them and guide them and teach them and listen to them, which is an important thing.
Yeah. empowerment is not a laissez-faire of lack of interest.
No.
That's a completely different idea,
No.
right? And that's why there is a connection.
Yes.
And that's how do you influence your bosses or peers in the professional service firms with the particular settings? So how do you engage in those and influence there?
I would have said about 5 years ago that I struggled with influencing my bosses, and I wasn't necessarily the one on the top of people's lists. I was always last to be chosen for the soccer match, for sure. And Mary Portas, the woman that was the creative director at Harvey Nichols that transformed Harvey Nichols, uses this term "beautiful misfit." I thought I was just a misfit those days, but certainly over the past 5 or 6 years, I've learned to get comfortable with who I am, how I show up, and what value I can offer. I've learned to be comfortable with sharing and showing my vulnerabilities. Before I would hide those because that wasn't the done thing. And I've learned to get comfortable with in support or there to support my bosses. And if they don't want it, then that's okay. Whereas previously I would have beaten myself up because I'd failed. Now it's a bit of a, I will be there. But interestingly, I would say I've created more stickiness with leaders in the past 5, 6, 7 years than previously, and that's because I am who I am, and that's because I give energy. I think ultimately I enthuse, I excite, I give alternative ideas and perspectives. So many leaders are caught up in this alpha paternalistic machine that we just need to stop, and it goes back to some of the critical agendas we're working on, the women in leadership, and actually my job is to try to be counter to that and to be that beautiful misfit.
I take two things away, which are brutally Stephen, most likely. You call it the stickiness, with the next level leader or bosses. I think that's a really interesting way. And the beautiful, misfit, which I think it's a concept that we hear often in different wording, right? Yeah. Because we have our minds, we have our thinking, but at the same time in an organization, and many struggle with that. They don't 100% fit, but that can actually be, as long as there's connectivity,
yes,
right? Actually, that's a good thing. Otherwise, we have one thinking pattern. That's all. Right? And so that is quite interesting to treasure that, right? Without becoming a maverick that sits outside, then that connectivity is gone, right? Your brand has moved to somewhere where...
Absolutely.
So that's fascinating.
You're only as good as the last piece of advice you gave.
Yes. So at the moment, so what are the leadership or business challenges that keep you awake at night? And that's, you should have your fair sleep, but what are the things that you really, really... think that these are important and causing a stir?
Time wakes me up.
Okay.
Lack of time, how to fit more in, and how to be more productive in a world where we have just all gotten into a back-to-back 24/7, largely through our friend technology. But also through what we normalised during the pandemic. So time really worries me because the older you get, the quicker it goes. But what I've realised recently is that I've become a victim of time. So I use time as a bit of an excuse as well. And what I'm practising at the moment, not doing it very well, is that you either want to do something or you don't want to do something. if you want to do something, then you'll find the time. If you don't want to do it, you need to be honest with people and things and just let go of it. So I'm trying to practice that, but not very successfully. And the second point then has to be about people, my team, how I help them grow and how I help them to develop and fulfill their ambitions, how I help them navigate the organisation and the complexities of that, but equally how I'm there to help them from a broader perspective. I have always had a bit of a philosophy that, you know, the team that you work with is also like your family, and that doesn't stop at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening. So my phone is always on for the team, and some people exercise that, at weird hours. But for me, again, worrying about my team is something that keeps me awake at night. But I'd say beyond that, the big pitch, the how am I going to make my numbers, how am I going to, really doesn't faze me. I might wake up with ideas, but that's kind of that machine doing wonderful things in the night. And is it brain processing? I love a bit of brain processing, but time and people are the things that keep me awake.
So people are on your list for time.
Yeah.
Right. When you distinguish between them, they are full on.
They're not mutually exclusive, are they? Those two things.
No, exactly. I was wondering, right? You know, but that'd be part. You know, that's interesting. You went a bit into kind of new ways of working, and you know, through COVID, but probably also beforehand already we saw that. With a way more digital-based working in whatever ways. Have you changed in leading? What do you think differently, or what's your take on that?
Have I changed differently as a leader in a bizarre way? I think it's actually helped me to connect with more people, working virtually. And that sounds very bizarre, because if you're in an office with 100 people, you can connect with 100 people. But I find those moments where you connect with people, you have true connections, but then it's lost, right? Then you move on to your next thing. And I think for me, the thing that I am struggling with at the moment, from a hybrid perspective, is, the whole social element and connection element from a work perspective, and the fact that if you go into the office on those rare days, some people are, doing more than 1 or 2 days a week these days, you've got to carve the time out to be there, just for those moments where you bump into somebody, you want to have a chat with somebody because you haven't seen them for ages. And so blending the efficiency of, you can go from meeting to meeting to meeting, with getting that social connection. So I think for me, learning to reprioritize my schedule when I'm in the office versus when I'm at home has become something that I'm learning to do. I wouldn't say I've learned it yet. I also learned during lockdown that I'm a bit of an introvert. And so I'd been in denial about that for many years, but I've embraced my introversion tendencies.
Yeah, it's interesting, that in a way, I think about it like when we are in a collaborative space, right? We actually want presence, right?
Yeah.
That's really what we look for, a mutual presence, and otherwise why go there?
Yeah,
because it's a replication of what we're doing. We see many organizations go in there, but that again is learning to be principled around these things. That is a different form of working. I find that fascinating. And it's a journey, right?
It is.
It's otherwise there's no point.
No, absolutely.
In a way.
And I'd always been one of those partners that, in the days where we had offices, that I would vacate my office and sit on the floor with the team, and my office would become the team room. And so the fact that my PA will book me an office when I'm in the main office is quite alien to me. I mean, why would I want to go and lock myself in a room on my own, even though I'm an introvert?
Yeah. Against stuff where we kind of question our patterns, right? Where things that seem to be obvious are not, right? And I think it's a healthy opportunity also to think, with COVID, to what do we change there, right? To make it meaningful either way. Let me ask one final question in that space before we move on. When you think back, I think, God, my engagement in leadership really got wrong, and if I can undo one or two things, looking back, what would that be?
So I think that there's been a lot of moments where my leadership has gone wrong, and actually, if I lift those moments up and think about the lessons that I've learned through that, what I've realised that very often, a challenge, a problem, a crisis from a leadership perspective has often followed me being impatient, me getting bored, or me, if I'm honest, abdicating responsibility, not empowering fully. And so there's been a number of occasions where, and I am fortunate, I will touch every bit of wood. I'm fortunate that there has never been any real problem. Okay, things have been resolvable. But those characteristics of Tim Clayton Ball are the things likely at the root cause of any problem. And so I am working on those. I am working on taking a breath, not jumping to a conclusion, not pulling that leash in immediately, but slowly pulling it in. And they're all lessons that I think I'm learning as I mature.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Like we all have these moments, right? But it's also good to hear that it's solvable in some form, right? That leads me to very nicely, how did your own leadership practice, skill, whatever you want to name it, how did that develop? How do you evolve that specific, skill set that you have over the years? How do you learn?
For me, it goes back to probably my first memorable client engagement as a professional consultant. And I'll say the memorable, first memory when you're a kid, that sort of thing. For me, I was, I'd always gravitated towards the people agenda type things and helping people through a change process. And I was given an opportunity to work with a global investment bank that had gone through an acquisition, and the acquisition wasn't very, very harmonious. And what I was given the job of working with the leadership team to help them align, think about their ways of working, and that probably was my scariest moment in my career, having to work with an exco when I was kind of late 30s, and but gave me the biggest lesson out of it. And what I learned from that is you have to dig beneath the surface, because it's often what lies deep beneath that are the things that are getting in the way. For this client, and if I gave you more specifics, it would give the game away. But religion really had something to do with that organisation, and even though it wasn't on the surface, it lay deep beneath, and it was the thing that was preventing them individually from joining the collective. And so that was my first introduction. And then fortunately, 3 years ago, after my purpose journey, I asked to play a role in our leadership business in Deloitte. And I was given the reins at that point, and really all of my career from that moment back in the late 90s to this moment has just kind of cemented my position. And now I get to work on our thinking, our propositions, our impact in the market, the conversations that we have with clients now that are so much richer than they were previously, and I get to meet people like you.
Yeah. So it's, like we always say, learning is a journey, right?
Yes.
Where there are pivotal moments, but then there are the day-to-day things that we take away, and through our conversation, we could hear already where the learning moments are. To your industry as a part of the professional service firms, if you think about what are the broadly, what are the leadership capabilities that your type of business actually needs? What would that be?
Yeah, and you can look at that from a couple of dimensions. One in terms of what we need to run our business, but also then what we need to engage with our clients in the market, who are leaders or people with the title of leader, and then how they lead their businesses and what the leadership looks like through their business. And so we look at it, fortunately, through three lenses. I think for our thinking is that it's not only who a client, who a leader is, but it's also what they do. And they're both important. And so one is about the conditions that they set for success, and that is around really driving at every opportunity to a point of clarity, providing clarity around ambition, who's accountable for what, how you're going to work together. So clarity, because very often we're stifled with ambiguity. These are all going to begin with C's, by the way, because we're consultants, so you can indulge us. But then there is the whole connection piece, how we help our leaders, ourselves, our clients as leaders, to break down silos. And in many organisations, there are so many silos to a point of connection, and how you encourage that collaboration and connection. Then the third piece is around how you really drive confidence in the organisation. You encourage people to take bold moves, to do things that are different, to step outside their comfort zones. Curiosity comes in there. Curiosity in the form of growth mindset, and how you encourage people to be a bit more open-minded. Because again, we see time and time again people coming through with the "we've always done it this way" response. So clarity, connection, curiosity, courage, in no particular order, coherence. So top to bottom coherence. So if this is our ambition, is the organisation set up to help us? And then capability, have I got the capability in that? I add a seventh one, which is around care and love. But again, that is a bit too off gender for some people. But so for me, it's the things that leaders do, and then it's the who they are. They've got to do that stuff. That's part and parcel of their role. Then if I think about the characteristics, the capabilities, you can get into a real tailspin with the definition around this. I've noticed the things around. Generative energy making, so being there to help people get excited about things, building energy in the organisation that's positive, being able to relate and to take the upper hand in terms of, they're not going to do it, you need to take responsibility for this, you need to pass that olive branch, or you need to create the opportunity to relate with one another. And there's an art of communication, which isn't one mouth is supreme. It's two ears, one mouth, and proper active listening as well. Then empowerment, and again, empowerment is a really misunderstood word, but how they're truly empowering people and the ability to let go, right? And again, these are all real personal things that for many people are self-limiting, whether it's a belief or not. So empowering people and the ability to empower and the ability to adapt and transform. And again, these are probably the traits or the capabilities that most leaders struggle with. There are very few leaders that are truly adaptive and transformative. We love to get into patterns. We love to get into normalizing situations and stabilizing them, because a lot of us don't like change. And then there's the whole growing agenda around energy and resilience, and your responsibility as a leader to not only look after yourself, but to create the right environment, and to be there to really observe and to act when you see that other people are struggling, because all of that stuff gets in the way of your ability to thrive as a team, as an organisation, as a family, so that's our school of thought around capability, which was really long-winded. I apologise.
Yeah, but it's no need to apologise. I think it's also showing the complexity of the demands to what we asked for, right? Yes. And then the difficulty to navigate those, there to ask the question, are we good at that?
Yes.
Right, which is these are probably 12, 15 things, right? And we expect everyone, that's where it's interesting when to step aside, but also where there's a space where you can't really step aside, right, around these. That's fascinating. Final question to you. What is the leadership myth, that really gets on your nerves? And if you could, you just kind of, let's stop that, let's get rid of that.
I think that leaders are born, not made. It has to be the myth that is just so outdated these days. But also that not everyone is a true and natural leader. Everyone has something in them. It just needs unlocking. And regardless of where they want to go in their careers, their lives, you don't have to want to aim for the CEO role in order to develop your leadership. And equally, in that, there's a shame on a lot of leaders. There's so many resources and tools out there that it's negligent not to invest time, your personal time, in developing yourself as a leader.
That's fascinating. We spend a lot of time on that question, right, where people stick to this idea, and we try here at Henley really to challenge that, right? But it's really fundamentally still that, right? It's a person. We say, it's much more complicated. And if we would have, oh my God, how much time would we have if we could get rid of that, right?
Indeed, right?
About something else, right? And really go to the practices and behavior.
How much money would we make?
That's could be, right? Well, thank you very much, Tim, for our conversation today. It has been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming to our HCell Jams and sharing your conversation, your experience and ideas from your journey in leadership.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.